We're recording. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Connie.
We actually talk like this almost every day, but we hate it.
Yeah, it's so hard to do it virtually. At first we were like, oh, this is great. We can still talk. After a couple weeks, it gets to, oh man, this is looking at more screens.
I feel guilty because, I am going to work on the radio station in the morning, but there's no one there. I'm not with anyone. I'm alone in a studio.
Yeah, you got your Lysol wipes going in the door, wiping everything down.
Oh, I look ridiculous when I go through the door because I have like a mask on. I go in, I hold my computer, then I have my purse and I have my Clorox wipes and I have one wipe in my hand and I have my gloves on, I have my mask on. And so then I'm like opening the door because I've got to open this main door to a building that's, normally houses hundreds of people. It's very odd.
Yeah.
And then the other day I freaked out because I got into the studio and I've had allergies. And so I went like this and I'm like, ah! So I washed my nose with Clorox wipe.
No way. I wonder how good that is for you.
Well, I'm going to have a squeaky clean nose. That's for sure.
Yeah. I had to go to Walmart and I walked in there and I turned around and I walked right out because there were like groups of young kids in Walmart. And then they were like going through the line. They only had the self-checkout open. They weren't wiping down the checkouts in between people or anything. And I went to Save Mart instead, and Save Mart felt way cleaner and healthier than Walmart. But not anything against Walmart, just that particular one was, you never know who's taking it seriously and who's not.
Like because we're going like this right now. We haven't hit our peak yet. And so that was what was kind of, I was watching it and it was scary for me because then it was just so real. Like, this is the real deal. And not that I didn't think it was real because my parents are in Seattle and I've been talking with them and seeing what's been going on over there. It's the real deal. My parents they've been in lockdown for 4 weeks now.
Oh, good.
And when I say that, like, I kind of had an argument with my dad the other day because I'm just like, Dad, you got to be safe. And he's like, I know, but I got to get out of the house. I'm going to freaking go nuts,
Well, there is that balance, between being safe physically and being safe mentally. We have to consider both things. I'm not saying if you're going crazy to go out and, do your normal life, but you do got to get creative about getting out of the house or changing up your energy in your environment. Because some of the mental stuff can be just as dangerous as the physical threat of the virus.
I had always worked in radio. I had never really had my own company because we work out of the Reno Collective normally. And I'd never really worked like that before. So when I first started at the Reno Collective, I would say to my husband, like, I just feel so cut off. Like I don't talk to anyone. You just kind of keep to yourself. And it was really weird for me at first. So that first year was very odd. And then, you'd been working there for a long time because I felt social distance when I was at the collective, when I first started working there, because I was so used to always being around people because I wasn't self-employed before this. And then I became self-employed because you've worked on your own for forever, right? You've always had your own business.
Yeah, I've been working on my own since 2013, 2014. There's a difference being at the collective because like at the collective, you can go in the kitchen. The collective, by the way, if anyone's listening, is a co-working space in Reno that is absolutely amazing. When this is all over, you should go support them. It's this big, giant house that feels very comfy and cozy, but has a lot going on for the community. So it's a good place to be if you're working on your own. It is hard there because there's people who are working and they're zoned in, and there's rules with headphones. Like if they have their headphones on, don't talk to them. They're busy. If they don't have headphones, make it quick. And then there's different areas that you can go to. So you can take your breaks, go to the kitchen, see who's in the kitchen, and kind of mingle.
There's connection. There's still connection.
There's still connection. At home, it's different. Like you really have to reach out for that connection. It's kind of like, when you're in college, you make all the friends in the world and those people end up being your friends for the rest of your life. But then you go away from college and you're trying to connect with other people who are in your same stage of life. You have to actually really work at that. I joke all the time that like after I got married and had kids, I went from dating men to dating women, because it's like, oh, I've got to do the hard work to go find the good friends who are interested in the same stuff I am, and it's work. It's hard. But like nothing worth it ever is easy. And those relationships that you really take time to cultivate are the ones that last a long time. Sometimes more so than college. So when I first started working by myself, I actually went into very deep depression. It was really hard for me because I didn't know how to do that. I'm just a social butterfly, and I follow, kind of like you, I follow other people's leads as far as energy goes. And I'm drawn to people's energy. So when it feels like there's a distance between you, you're like, oh, well, it didn't happen. And you have to kind of change your mindset from, oh, nothing's happening to me, to like, how am I going to happen to other people today? So like at the collective, I feel like you're much more social than you were in the beginning, because now you go up and you'll talk to people, you'll be the instigator of conversations. You'll say, hey, let's have a meeting.
The other thing that I had a hard time with the collective, which was my own putting on a judgment, was, oh, these people are really smart. They're all tech people.
Yeah.
I'm not a smart tech person, so they don't want to talk to me. So it's like, and it was that they never did anything, but it was my own judgment, that I was like, well, they're way smarter than me, and I'm just some dumb girl that used to be on the radio, and I'm starting this crazy next stage project. They don't want to have anything to do with me. I just assumed everyone was an introvert there, and they weren't. Like now I talk to people, and I actually know people's names now. And,
right. A lot of people who are techie that work at co-working spaces usually are the extroverted ones, because the introverted just doesn't want anybody there to bother them. They're not paying for their own space. They're able to work at home. We see each other from the outside, and a lot of times, especially in a traditional job setting, you see the world in a hierarchy. Like, oh, this person's at this level, that person makes more money than that person, and that's a big boss. And so we're kind of wired to look at people based on roles, and we forget that we're all just human. And there's a lot of people just who are faking it till they make it, because they might not be that much smarter than you, but they just know that one thing that maybe you don't. And so if you never talk to that person, you might never learn that one thing that you don't, that they know. You just think they're a step ahead of you, but they're just a step ahead of you in this one area. And there might be something that you have that they're just like, oh my gosh, Connie Ray, I could never talk to her. She's like this amazing radio personality, and I'm just this Joe Schmo tech guy. You gotta remember that people are human. We're all human, and we all have our skills, and that's separate from our humanity.
What is your actual background? Like, what did you go to college for?
I went to school for broadcast journalism.
Okay.
Actually started in print journalism, and that was really awesome. And then I moved to broadcast journalism. I did an internship at KSHB, Action News in Kansas City. And that was really, really awesome. And then right after I graduated, the stock market tanks in the 2008, 2009. I got offered a job, an on-air job in Georgia for $7.50 an hour. That was what it worked out to. It was actually salaried for like $19,000 a year, but for the hours they wanted me to work, it worked out to like $7.50 an hour. And I was like, I have student loans. I can't even afford to take the only job that I could find at that time, because at that time, all the news stations were shutting down and being bought out, and it was a whole mess. And so I actually got a job, and I was so excited, and I couldn't take it. And it broke my heart. So I didn't end up in journalism, doing a lot of blogging and doing a lot of design for a few companies. I worked at a wedding DJ company for a while, and I ended up running it in 2010. My brother was working at one of the first dispensaries that was ever legal, and I've never done drugs illegally, but at the time nobody had jobs, and I was working as a waitress, and it wasn't really a good gig. So my brother had to hook up with this dispensary, and all these stoners were working there, and they did not know how to run a business. So that's where I got my business learned how to do business and operations, they brought me on as an assistant to fix their billing. They brought out a giant box full of receipts from the last year that they had been in business for about a year. And they set it down in front of me, just like a box with just receipts that they had. And they're like, "Can you do our bookkeeping?" And I was like, "Yes." And we ended up growing that company over the course of 4 years. We took that company, local pot shop, to having 52 employees, 2 grow locations. And then we actually became the second ever recreationally compliant dispensary in Colorado. So one of the first ever. So that was a really cool experience for me. So and then I did, some of their branding. I worked with another guy, and learned some branding stuff. And that's when I started getting into graphic design, which in college, I did start in graphic design, and then I switched over to journalism. This is my background. This is my story. So life story, here you go. So yeah, I used some of that. I built a website, and at the time I was like, okay, I can figure out WordPress, sure. We paid this one chick to get us set up on WordPress, and then I got into it. I started building my own site, and then I got into Illustrator. I was like, oh, well, I can make some cool stuff. And then once I got married and had kids, I was like, I got to figure out a way to work from home. I actually started a creative market store where I was like selling clip art that I had made in Illustrator, or that I had taken from some public domain books. And so it just kind of blew up, and then you find out what people need and you do it. Then for a while I got hired at an SEO company. So I kind of have a background of both design and business stuff kind of put together. It was a lot of trial and error and figuring it out, because I had to stay home with the kids, and we weren't making much money at the time, so we couldn't really afford childcare.
Yeah.
A full-time job to pay for childcare would have canceled out any money that I made. So I was kind of forced to figure it out working from home.
I love that you're like a creative and a technical person, because I went to theater school. I'm like a total theater geek. I went to Performing Arts College in Seattle and, studied theater and acting. And then my major at the end, voice and speech training for actors. And I worked in a couple of theater houses where, like if you're working on a play and you have a dialect or something like that, I would work with them, and learned a lot of different techniques in college of how to be a better speaker. And I always wanted to be a public speaker. I knew that. I wasn't really sure what it was. I kind of accidentally fell into radio because I got a job. I literally was like an ambulance chaser for a small news station in Bremerton, Washington, which is outside of Seattle. And it was literally like, they'd be like, all right, take and it was like this giant suitcase phone that you'd take out, and you would go to, like, literally I would go to accidents. Or one of the biggest stories we had which is really common in Washington State, because there's a lot of trees, a lot of kids get lost in the woods.
Oh yeah.
And these 2 little kids got lost in Seebeck, and it was like one of my big stories. And I went out and just was doing live reports, and it was so crazy because they'd been missing for like 2 days. And then in the middle of the morning, we're there, and it's like all these news cameras and everyone's there. And I was like talking to some other newscaster, and I looked like over his shoulder, and I'm like, are those the kids? And they literally had come down the back. They found their way home.
Oh, wow.
And it was crazy. And everyone's like, oh my God, like we ran over, and they were these.
Wow, that's a cool story. That's the thing about news, is like, it's just such an exciting career because you follow all of the interesting stories and you almost get to be a part of it.
I loved morning radio because it was like a chance to be silly. And like, I looked at morning radio as a way to start people's day off. Like I could be funny and be silly and like make them feel good about themselves. There used to be a show up in Seattle, Robert and Maynard, and they were just hilarious. They just would do like voices and crazy stuff. And then I actually ended up, there was a Disney station up there, and I did some voice work for them, like for different characters for, shows that they were putting on, or commercials.
Yeah.
And then that was really, I started doing commercials, and then I ended up literally packed everything into a Dodge Neon, and I just drove all over the West Coast, and I was like giving radio stations cassette tapes, because that's how long ago that was. Because I graduated college in 95, and I ended up getting the job out here, and I got an afternoon gig. And it was so funny when I first started here. I was Connie Ray in the midday, Like, I love the art of radio. I love that connection of radio, of
Mhm.
just being silly and kind of being a goofball, and really wanted to try something new. And that's when we started The Next Stage. That was what I was really frustrated with, was at the end of my radio career, especially like that last 3 or 4 years, is we've done so much like great community work and so much cool stuff in the community, but it's like radio's like, 2 minute, 3 minute bursts. That's it. And it's hard, it was like, I just was meeting all these great people, and I felt like I wanted I wanted more from them. I wanted to share more stories or hear more things about them. And I really wanted to do a podcast, and I did a podcast for a short period of time. I regret kind of doing that podcast now, just because it was not really for me. It wasn't who I really was. But
A lot of times we latch on to what other people are doing, and it's not really in line with our, like, as a branding person now, it's not really in line with our brand. But that's kind of like what I was talking about before, how we there's things that happen to us, and then there's things that we make happen, and there's so much more just joy and purpose that comes from the things that we make happen. And it's harder to do that, and it takes courage, and you could fail doing that, and it's scary.
Mhm.
But like, you made The Next Stage happen. The other thing was something that you're like, okay, I'm getting my feet wet, I know what this is like. But then you took that jump away from probably the stability of the radio station.
Oh,
You took
totally.
that jump into this amazing thing, which, if you guys have not seen The Next Stage, which I'm sure you have because this is your podcast, check out The Next Stage, because it's just so inspiring. It's all these inspiring stories that are truly like the next stage of how Reno is growing.
Totally. And it was like, it was the perfect timing, because Reno is transforming so much. I mean, right now we're on lockdown, but it's just such a growing city with so much going on, and a lot of forward thinkers are here. I think a lot of idea makers are here. And that was really what I wanted to do, was really just kind of highlight those people. And it's also like a look at how a city can transform, because I'll be honest with you, when I first moved to Reno, like, it was not a welcoming city. They were not all, oh, great, you're not from here, welcome. You and I have something in common too, because my dad wasn't in the military, but I grew up on military bases. My dad worked for the government, and you grew up as a military brat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I experienced new schools and new people all the time. Like, it's like a rollover every 2-3 years.
Right.
And even like where I'm from in Seattle, there's so many military families. I mean, Bremerton, where I'm originally from, is a Navy town. So there was always an influx of Navy people. So there was always this rollover. So even before I moved to the Philippines as a kid, I grew up in an environment with a lot of change.
A lot of times I feel like I was always the new girl, and it was almost, you had like this period of fame where you're the new girl, you're something new and interesting.
Totally. I lived in the Philippines for 5 years. We moved there when I was in 6th grade, and then we left at the end of my 10th grade year. I spent a year back home in Bremerton and went to school, and then I came back that year, my junior year. Like, I moved to Seattle, and it was like, that's when grunge started. So I like left the Philippines and was like cute little, like, wore a spree and my Swatch watch, and was all cute. And then I discovered punk rock music and was like going to Fugazi concerts and Nirvana and Soundgarden, and I wore an Onk and all black and cut off jeans and Doc Martens. And so I came back my senior year, and everyone was like, that knew me from before. First day of my senior year, I wore black patent leather shoes with these big bows and black socks that came over my knee with peace signs, and a ripped up pair of jeans and like a black shirt with an Onk. Graduated high school, and then moved back from the Philippines and went to school in Seattle. And that was like the greatest time ever, because I mean, literally punk rock music and grunge was it happening in my city. And it was like, you would get on the bus, and I'd ride the bus with like guys from Pearl Jam, or you would go to a free concert at the park at Gasworks Park, and it'd be like Alice in Chains, or it was really an awesome time to grow up and go to college during all of that, because it was right at my fingertips. It was awesome. And it was Seattle wasn't tech yet. Mm-hmm. So it was like a working man's town. It was it was shipping, and it was Boeing, and it was the shipyard, it was. And then all of a sudden tech came in, and Microsoft was born, and things kind of changed. But like, I lived in an apartment in right on Capitol Hill, and I paid like $300 a month and that was my half of the rent.
Yeah, like imagine how much different your life would be, or how different of a person you would have been if you didn't have that little stint, you know, in your junior year in Seattle. Like,
oh my God, my dad would have loved that. I don't think he liked me bringing home my devil lock boyfriend with tattoos.
I don't think my dad would have been okay with something like that either.
My dad was like, what are you doing? And plus going to an art school was awesome. Like I was just with all these creative, amazing people that were super talented, and just
there's so many ways that like being a part of an arts community, even if you're not an artistic person, can change the course of your life. I think having some sort of arty people in your life is so incredibly valuable. So like if you're not an artsy person and you want to change your life up and get new experiences, or you feel like you're stuck in a rut, like go be on like a movie project, just, you know, offer to hold the sound thing, or, you know, to carry equipment, or do something that you are good at, because just being around those people will seriously lift your spirits. I've had periods of being in business and in news and in you know, design, but like something about like, especially performance arts, being a part of collective artistic projects, whether you're directly doing the art or not, those are the things that people always look back and remember, because those are the colorful, collaborative, human connection things that you get in your life.
Which is why I think right now, as I'm diving in more now than I'm knowing I'm going to be here for 30 days, like I have no other choice but to push myself. Like
Right.
there's nothing else to do. Like I have to do this if I want to continue and push through and you know, because like the next stage, I guess you could say, is kind of on hold, but the next stage, the way we were doing it, is on hold. But it's also
Well,
the next stage of Connie Ray, like
yeah.
of my intellect.
What is that phrase? It's like necessity is like the birthplace of innovation, or something like that.
Oh, that's it. Because there's times right now, like I've had meetings with like you and our other team, Claire, Katie, that we love so much. If you're not around, I gotta do it. I gotta figure it out. The isolation is making me push my boundaries, or push into things that I never thought that I would be doing.
Right.
And then it's funny when I get it done, I'm like, oh my God, I did it.
Yeah. And well, then it helps you gain confidence too. I mean, I guess while a lot of people are in isolation, that's, you know, one thing that you can think about is like, you know, what do I not usually do that I rely on other people to do? And is that something I'm willing to try, you know, during this period? You know, try things you're not used to doing, because that's what's going to help with the boredom. And I talk about this a lot. There's this book called The 1% Rule. Humans have the need to see making progress. So you're either growing or you're dying.
Yes.
And if you're making incremental progress, and you can look back and see that, that's what makes you feel full of purpose and accomplishment. You don't have to be like, you don't have to study, you know, how to build a website from HTML code and then know how to do it tomorrow. But, you know, looking back and saying, okay, at your day, and saying, okay, I learned something new today, or I got one step closer to my goal. And that is what keeps humans out of insanity. So if you're sitting there watching Netflix the entire time and you're in that just like edge of your seat, what's happening next mode, you're going to waste all your time, and you're not going to feel like you've accomplished anything. So if you can just say, okay, I'm going to spend 90% of my time watching Netflix, and the other, you know, 10% working towards, you know, a goal that's for me.
What you do within this time is going to set you up for when we're out of this. This is really going to be a leveling of the playing field. Where do you want to be when you're out of this? Because the world will be your oyster, because you can grab on, and this will be the time when you come back out of all of this to really grab on to what you truly want to do. I know more now than ever that I want to continue to be a host and share stories with people. It's somehow, some way, this is what I want to do for the remainder of my life.
Another client that is of yours that I got the privilege of talking to, Chuck Kozak, he's been doing law forever now, and he's a really, really good lawyer. And, I was talking to him and I was like, like, how long are you going to be doing this? And he was like, this is my passion. This is what I like solving problems for people and, genuinely researching and doing all that lawyer stuff. And that's his passion. And it was almost like, oh man, like, what is that one thing that I would be happy doing until I, like, literally until I die, like, that I don't feel I have to retire from. And I feel like for you, it's the next stage. Is like, when you talk about the next stage, your eyes light up and you're happy and you want to share and you have stories to tell and you're good at telling stories. As we're sitting here in our homes watching people, die or suffer or lose their jobs, we're kind of reevaluating, well, what is really important to us? And that's why I have a podcast too. It's called Before I Die. And it's about living with the end in mind. I started it in January. And it's kind of just really odd timing because it's very, very powerful right now of like, okay, I've only got so much time on this earth and I'm the only one that gets to create what that means, what each moment that I have means. And so every second that you're spending, this is going to be a little morbid, every second that you're spending on something that doesn't really matter to you is something that you're going to throw away. And at the end of your life, you're not going to be saying, oh, I wish I had more money, or, oh, I wish I had, kept my house cleaner. You're going to be saying, I wish I had more time.
I've never met anyone on their deathbed that was like, gosh, I wish I'd work some more.
Right. Well, I mean, unless that work is their...
Yeah, your passion, but it's never like, God, wish I'd made some more money. Wish I'd, just kept on trying to do that job I hated. Like, no one is going to say that, like, ever.
Well, and it's not always about your passion too. Like, sometimes the way you spend your time is, maybe you don't particularly love what you're doing, but you see the payoff of it. You see that it's meaningful. So it's really what you assign meaning to.
Right.
In my opinion, I mean, everyone has a different view of life, but like, if you think about it, there's 7 billion people in the world, right? This is mind blowing to me. It might seem simple to you, but, and in the known universe, we haven't found anyone else other than the 7 billion people who have the cognitive abilities that we do as humans or more. Billions and billions of galaxies. As far as we know, we're the only ones that can create meaning. We're the only ones that can take the time that we have and put purpose to it. Even animals don't really do that. I mean, I think some do. I would argue a dog could do that. But the power that we have, it feels like 7 billion people are doing the same thing. And, like, I've been trying to convince myself to get online and put my face out there because I have a message that I want to share. And it seems like there's a lot of other people doing it because in my world, I'm watching a lot of people say a lot of the same things. But in the grand scheme of things, in the 7 billion, there's very few people doing that. And in the scope of the entire universe and all the energy and all the creation and all the things that can have meaning, I'm one of the very few people that can assign, you are one of the very few people that can assign and create that meaning. And that is like such an incredible, powerful thing that we as humans downplay a lot. And when you lose track of your meaning, that's when you lose track of your purpose. And that's when you start looking back and like regretting things. You jumping off of the radio station that didn't have meaning to you and creating the next stage, which is so beautiful. There's just some really beautiful stories in that. Like, seriously, go watch the next stage if you haven't yet. That's you taking your little corner of the universe and creating meaning, and that's going to be there forever. That exists. That is going to change the course of history. That's going to change the course of lives. And that's something that's meaningful. And so each person that's listening to this, and encouraging you to go and find your own meaning. And now I'm going to get off my soapbox.
No, but I feel like your podcast is like that too. Like, we don't ever really stop to think about the whole picture. We're always looking at, like, one day at a time, or I got this thing I got to do tomorrow, or I got that. And it's like,
right.
we really only do have a limited time that we're here. What do you want that, like, imagine if that time is a portrait. What do you want that portrait to look like? Do you want it to be a beautiful portrait of something that you're going to be so proud to look at? Or is it going to be, like a jibber jabber of a bunch of things that don't really mean anything at all, that someone's going to look at it and say, well, I don't even have any clue what this was. And it's like, I really want to create a beautiful portrait at the end. And I think you and I are also in this same thing too, where when you have kids, and like you have a daughter and I have 2 daughters, it's like, I want my girls to know that they can do what they want. Like, don't let anything hold you back, because I did hold myself back for a long time. I did, because I had so much self-doubt.
Self-doubt is, something that I struggle with every day. I'm struggling with it right now, to be honest. Self-doubt is universal. If you have someone that says to you that they have never struggled with self-doubt, that person's a liar. So straight up, you're a liar. So, but self-doubt also feels incredibly isolating and lonely. So while we are all experiencing it simultaneously, we also feel as though that's our cage. Like, have you ever been just really upset and then somebody's just like, what's wrong with you? Just deal with it. Like, it's not that big of a deal, It is that big of a deal in your mind. It's exactly as big of a deal as your mind makes it.
Well, it's like I always say to people, like, don't tell me how I feel.
Exactly.
Like, you don't know how I feel.
Don't
be like, well, you could just suck it up. Well, you don't know me. You're not me. So don't tell me that I could just suck it up. Like I struggle with that, because I find myself wanting people to think like me. Like, my husband tells me all that time. He's like, people don't think like you. Remember that, you don't want them to do that to you. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
What would the world be like if everyone thought like Connie Ray?
Oh my God. I don't know. It might be a little scary. I'm a total goofball. Like, I used to say that when Story and I used to use the hashtag all the time when I would Goofy Girls Rule. Because I've always been a goofball. Like, I really have. Like, I'm like, me now. Like, I'm silly and always making crazy little comments. And even in the midst of all this on the radio show, like, I try to be positive and silly. Like, today I just was like being silly on the show. I'm like, I don't care. I need this. I need some silliness. I was even talking about you. Like, I was saying that how cute it was the other day that your son was jumping on your back while we were having a meeting. And I actually read this great article that said that right now, CEOs and bosses they're becoming more human, because we have no other choice. Like, your cat is going to walk across your computer screen, and your kid is going to run around in his Batman suit, because we're at home. And now guess what? You're in my world. This is my real life world. Like, right now, I made this all look really good. You have no idea. There's like piles of laundry right over here.
My kid is actually knocking on my door right now. He's supposed to be sleeping.
Hey, I'm sorry that my kid's here, but I'm at home. You're lucky I'm freaking working.
Right, exactly. It's really, really hard to work from home, because there's so many distractions at home. And especially now when, like, if you were the only one at home, you could probably make it work pretty easy, and even that's hard. Like, I couldn't do it by myself.
If I was here alone, I'd be going insane.
But it's like 20 million times harder with the kids.
I might be an alcoholic. If I was here alone, I'd probably be drinking. I'd be like this, I'm alone, but this glass of wine is my friend.
I saw all the COVID memes. I saw a meme, and it was like 2 weeks ago, drinking at home alone means that you're a sorry slob. Drinking at home now means you're a responsible citizen.
Well, I guess we have to go be moms right now then.
I guess I got to take care of my children.
I know. Got to take my kid for a walk so we don't go insane. Well, I love you so much. I'm so glad we met. You know what? It's one of my favorite words of all time is serendipity. Unexpected happy findings. I love moments like that, or friendships like that, or, my husband is like that. It's like total unexpected happy finding. I had always said, I'm not marrying anyone that already had kids. And then bam, I'm like, oh, that's what I love most about him, is that he's a dad.
Right.
It's like kind of why I fell in love with him. He was such a great dad. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Unexpected happy finding.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I found you.
Connie's Corner has been brought to you by Kozak & Associates, an A-Story Media production.